My name is Cassandra, and at 32 years old, I finally achieved my dream of owning a beautiful condo worth $450,000. Years of hard work in real estate paid off, but my demanding parents, who always favored my brother Mark, had other plans for my property. I never imagined attending Mark's birthday party would end with blood streaming down my face and my family in shambles. Their escalating demands crossed a line that night, changing everything forever. If you are watching this right now, please let me know where you are viewing from. In the comments, hit that like button and subscribe as I take you through the nightmare that forced me to reclaim my power. Growing up in our middle-class suburban home in Connecticut, I learned early that the spotlight would never be mine. My parents, Richard and Linda, created a household where Mark shined while I remained in the shadows. Our small four-bedroom colonial house seemed to have trophies for Mark in every corner. His soccer medals, debate team awards, and academic certificates plastered the walls. My achievements, when they happened, earned a nod and quick redirection to whatever Mark had accomplished that week. "Your brother got straight," as again Mom would say after glancing at my report card with 3 A's and 2 B's. "You should ask him to help you with your math." Dad was more direct in his favoritism. "Mark is going places he would announce at dinner parties, and Cassandra, well, she tries hard." The adults would chuckle while I pretended to be busy helping in the kitchen. This pattern continued throughout my childhood. When I won second place in the state writing competition at 14, my parents missed the ceremony because Mark had a regular season soccer game. When I got accepted to college with a partial scholarship, the celebration lasted about 5 minutes before turning to concerns about how they would afford Mark's Ivy League tuition the following year. The emotional manipulation was constant and effective. "Family comes first," Mom would remind me whenever I showed independence. "Everything we do is for this family." What she meant was everything I did should benefit the family, particularly my brother and their dreams for him. I determined early that financial independence would be my escape. While studying business administration in college, I worked 30 hours weekly at a coffee shop and another 15 as a campus tour guide. My roommates partied on weekends while I picked up extra shifts. Every dollar went either to tuition or my growing savings account. The road wasn't easy. My first year after graduation, I applied to 78 jobs before landing an entry-level position at a real estate firm. My starting salary barely covered rent for my tiny studio apartment and student loan payments. For 3 years, I ate ramen noodles 4 nights a week and never bought new clothes. When I made my first successful property sale, the commission changed everything. I still remember staring at my bank account, seeing a number with 4 digits before the decimal point for the first time. I called my parents, hoping, finally, for that elusive approval. "That is nice, honey," Mom said, distracted. "Did you hear Mark got promoted? He will be making 6 figures now. We are so proud." That conversation was a turning point. I stopped seeking their validation and poured my energy into building my career. I studied market trends at night, networked with industry professionals on weekends, and took every client nobody else wanted. Gradually, my commission checks grew larger. Each one represented another brick in the wall between my past and future. As my financial situation improved, I created distance from my family. Sunday dinners became monthly visits. Holiday gatherings shortened from weekend stays to day trips. I made excuses about work commitments that weren't entirely untrue. The space helped me recognize the toxic patterns I had normalized. 6 years of disciplined saving and smart investments culminated in my dream purchase, a 2-bedroom waterfront condo in a prestigious building. Modern, bright, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the harbor, it represented everything I had worked for. The day I signed the final papers, I felt a sense of accomplishment that needed no external validation. Still, some part of me hoped my achievement might finally earn my parents' respect. I invited them to see my new home, arranging for a small catering spread and champagne to celebrate. They arrived an hour late. Mom walked through the rooms with a pinched expression, pointing out issues only she could see. "These cabinets will need replacing soon," she said in the kitchen. "And this countertop already shows water stains." Dad was more concerned with the financial aspects. $450,000. "In this market, you got taken advantage of, Cassandra. You should have consulted me first." Neither offered congratulations. As they left, Mom patted my hand and said, "It is very ambitious for someone like you. I hope you can keep up with the payments." I closed the door behind them and leaned against it, promising myself that their approval no longer mattered. My home was mine, purchased with money I earned through hard work and determination. No one could take that away from me. But even as I made that promise, I had no idea how literally it would be tested in the months to come. The first hints of trouble came during a casual phone call with my mother 3 months after I moved into my condo. Between updates about neighborhood gossip and complaints about her book club, she mentioned that Dad was having a bit of a rough patch with his construction business. "Nothing to worry about," she assured me quickly. "Just some cash flow problems with a big client delaying payment." 2 weeks later, Dad called directly, something he rarely did. "Your mother mentioned my business situation," he said without preamble. "It is a temporary setback, but I wondered if you might have some resources to help tide things over." "Resources?" I asked, already feeling the familiar knot in my stomach. "Investment capital. Just a small loan. 20,000 or so should cover it until these payments come through." The request shocked me. $20,000 wasn't a small amount, especially when I had just stretched my finances to purchase my condo. Still, family obligation ran deep. "I can help with 5,000, I offered, "but I just bought this place and my savings are pretty depleted right now." His tone chilled immediately. "I see. Well, if that is all you can manage." I transferred the money that evening, along with a supportive message about his business prospects. I never received confirmation that he got it, nor any thanks. The next time we spoke, neither of us mentioned it. A month later, I learned from my cousin that Mark had proposed to his girlfriend of 2 years. The news came through family gossip rather than from my parents or brother directly, which stung but didn't surprise me. When Mom finally called to share the wonderful news, her excitement bubbled over. "We are planning the most beautiful wedding," she gushed. "June at the Lakeside Gardens. 200 guests minimum. The reception venue deposit alone was 12,000, but nothing is too good for our Mark." I wondered briefly where that money had come from when they had just asked me for help with business troubles, but kept the thought to myself. "We will need your support, of course," she continued. "Family pitches in for these important moments." Her words carried an expectation that became clearer at the engagement dinner they hosted at an expensive steakhouse. Dad ordered multiple bottles of champagne for the table without glancing at the prices. Mom wore a new designer dress she made sure everyone knew about. Meanwhile, Mark and his fiancée Jessica showed off a diamond ring that must have cost at least $15,000. As coffee and dessert arrived, Dad cleared his throat and raised his glass. "To family coming together for each other. Speaking of which, we will be setting up a family wedding fund. Cassandra, with your success in real estate, we will be looking to you to make a significant contribution." All eyes turned to me. The expectation hung heavy in the air. "I will certainly give Mark and Jessica a nice wedding gift," I replied carefully. "We are thinking more substantial than a toaster, sweetheart," Mom said with a tight smile. "Family helps family in meaningful ways." The conversation moved on, but the message was clear. My financial success was viewed as a family resource, not my personal achievement. The pressure increased over the following weeks. Texts from Mom included links to expensive wedding venues with notes like, "This would be perfect if we could afford it." Dad began calling with updates about wedding costs, each conversation ending with hints about my contribution. During a Sunday visit to their house, the hints became explicit demands. "Your brother has always been there for you," Dad said as we sat in the living room. "Now it is your turn to support him." "I have always supported Mark," I replied, confused by the characterization. "But I am not sure what you are asking exactly." Mom joined in her voice, taking on the martyred tone I knew well. "We raised you to understand family obligations. We gave up so much for you children. And now that one of you has been blessed with financial success, it seems only right to share that blessing." "What exactly are you asking me to share?" Dad leaned forward, eyes fixed on mine. "We need to secure a loan for the wedding and some other expenses. Your condo would make excellent collateral." The request stunned me into momentary silence. They wanted to use my home, the culmination of years of hard work, as collateral for their loan. "I cannot do that," I finally said. "My condo is not an asset I am willing to risk." "Risk?" Dad scoffed. "There is no risk, unless you think we would default on payments." That is not the point. This is my home, not a financial tool for the family to use. Mom began to cry, a tactic I recognized from childhood. After all, we sacrificed for you. How can you be so selfish and ungrateful? I left their house that day with a migraine building behind my eyes and their accusations ringing in my ears. But I held firm on my refusal. The situation escalated when I received a call from my Aunt Susan, who lived across the country. "I just wanted to say how generous you are being," she said. "Your parents told everyone about you giving them your condo to help with their financial situation. The whole family is proud of your selflessness." My blood ran cold. "What exactly did they tell you?" "That you are signing over your condo to them so they can use the equity to stabilize their finances and help with Mark's wedding. They said it was your idea, a way to repay them for all they have done for you." After that disturbing conversation, I called Mark, hoping my brother might see reason and help moderate our parents' expectations. "They have done everything for us," he said instead. "Dad's business is struggling because he took out loans to pay for our education. The least you can do is help them out now that you are doing well. By giving them my home." "That is not reasonable, Mark." "No one said give. Just let them leverage the equity." "Why are you being so difficult about this? It is just a condo. You can always buy another one later." That conversation revealed that Mark was completely aligned with our parents. Whatever support I had hoped for from my brother was clearly not forthcoming. 2 days after my disappointing conversation with Mark, a certified letter arrived from a bank I had never done business with. Opening it revealed a partially completed loan application with my condo listed as collateral. My parents had begun the process without my consent, apparently, assuming they could pressure me into signing the final documents. Alarm bells ringing in my head, I contacted a real estate attorney to understand my risks and options. Her advice was unequivocal. "Do not sign anything," she warned. "Based on what you have told me, this sounds like a concerning pattern of financial pressure. If you allow them to use your property as collateral and they default on payments, you could lose your home." The attorney suggested I check my credit report and place a freeze on new applications. When the report arrived, it showed 5 recent credit inquiries from different lending institutions, all made without my knowledge. "Someone is shopping around for loans using your information," the attorney said when I called her again. "This goes beyond family pressure into potential identity fraud." Confronting my parents became necessary, though every instinct warned me it would not go well. I drove to their house on a Tuesday evening, determined to establish firm boundaries. Their modest colonial-style home looked smaller than I remembered, the paint peeling slightly around the trim. Dad answered the door in his bathrobe, despite it being only 7 in the evening. "Cassandra," he said flatly, "what brings you by unannounced?" The living room told its own story. Shopping bags from expensive stores lined one wall. A new large-screen television dominated the space where their old model had been. Mom's collection of designer purses had grown several, still with tags attached. "I received a loan application with my condo listed as collateral," I said, placing the documents on the coffee table, "and my credit report shows multiple inquiries I never authorized." Mom entered from the kitchen, her face immediately hardening. "You always jump to the worst conclusions." "What conclusion should I draw when someone is trying to use my property and credit without my permission?" Dad puffed up his face, reddening. "Everything we did was for you. Your whole life we sacrificed. Now you have some success, and suddenly you are too good for your family." This is not about being too good for anyone. This is about financial boundaries and respect for my property. Property Mom spat the word. "Listen to yourself. So cold and calculating. Where did we go wrong with you?" "You raised me," I answered quietly. "You taught me how the world works. Now you are upset that I learned those lessons too well." Dad leaned forward, his voice dropping to a dangerous level I remembered from childhood scoldings. "Let me explain our situation plainly, since you want to talk about reality. We owe $320,000 on this house that is worth maybe $290,000. My business is not having a temporary cash flow problem. It is failing. We have maxed out 6 credit cards paying for basics and, yes, some luxuries, because your mother deserves nice things after everything she has done for this family." Mom nodded emphatically beside him. "Mark's wedding is costing us another $50,000 minimum," he continued. We need your condo's equity, not want, need. As your parents, we expect you to step up. The brutal honesty was actually refreshing after months of manipulation, but the expectation behind it remained outrageous. I am sorry about your financial troubles, I said, but my condo is not the solution. I can help you create a budget, maybe look at bankruptcy options that would let you keep the house. Bankruptcy. Mom recoiled as if I had suggested something obscene. What would people think? They would think you had financial problems and took responsible steps to address them. Dad stood abruptly. We did not raise you to lecture us. We raised you to respect and obey your parents. Clearly, we failed in that regard. I respect you both, I said, though in that moment I wasn't sure it was true. But I will not sign over my property or allow you to use it as collateral. After everything we gave you, Mom said, tears forming. 22 years of food, clothing, shelter, braces for your teeth, dance lessons you begged for, college tuition, which I paid back with interest. I reminded her, referring to the Parent Plus loans they had taken out, and insisted I repay despite them being legally their responsibility. Money isn't everything, she sniffed. We gave you life. I realized then that no logical argument would work. In their minds, my very existence indebted me to them forever, with no limit to what they could demand in return. As I prepared to leave, Dad delivered his parting shot. Your brother's birthday party is Saturday. The whole family will be there. Think carefully about your decision before then. Family has a long memory for those who turn their backs when needed. The implied threat was clear. Comply or be ostracized. The days before Mark's party were filled with messages from extended family. Cousins called to check in while delivering thinly veiled suggestions that I should do the right thing for my parents. An uncle emailed links to articles about family financial support. Even my grandmother, usually removed from family drama, called to remind me that blood is thicker than water. The coordinated pressure campaign only strengthened my resolve. Each call confirmed that my parents had been spreading their narrative, widely casting themselves as victims of their ungrateful daughter. I almost decided to skip Mark's party entirely. But avoiding the confrontation would only delay the inevitable. Better to face it directly and establish my position once and for all. The night before the party, I barely slept, rehearsing what I would say when the subject inevitably arose. I needed to be firm but not antagonistic, clear but not cruel. These were still my parents despite everything. What I failed to anticipate was just how public and dramatic the confrontation would become. Saturday arrived with perfect spring weather, almost mocking the storm I knew was brewing. I dressed carefully in a navy blue dress that projected professional confidence, applied subtle makeup to cover the stress breakout on my chin, and drove the 40 minutes to my parents' house with knots twisting in my stomach. Cars lined the street outside their colonial-style home. Mark had always been popular, and from the looks of it, at least 30 people had come to celebrate his 29th birthday. I recognized vehicles belonging to aunts, uncles, cousins, and family friends I had known since childhood. Taking a deep breath, I plastered on a smile and walked up the familiar concrete path to the front door, birthday gift tucked under my arm. Before I could knock, the door swung open to reveal Jessica, Mark's fiancée, looking uncomfortable. "Cassandra," she said with forced brightness, "you made it." The living room buzzed with conversation that dimmed noticeably as I entered. Relatives who normally would have rushed to hug me suddenly became fascinated with their drinks or the appetizer trays. Mark stood by the fireplace with a group of his college friends, deliberately avoiding eye contact. Mom emerged from the kitchen carrying a tray of deviled eggs. Her eyes locked with mine, and she gave a tight smile that did not reach her eyes. "Cassandra is here," she announced unnecessarily. "Now everyone is present." Dad appeared at her side, one hand resting possessively on her shoulder. "Better late than never," he said, though I had arrived exactly at the time specified on the invitation. I approached Mark, extending his gift. "Happy birthday." He accepted it with a nod, placing it on the already crowded gift table without comment. The coldness of his reception hurt more than I had anticipated. For the next hour, I navigated the party like a ship through hostile waters. Conversations stopped when I approached groups. Aunt Patricia asked pointedly how my fancy condo was working out. Uncle Robert made a comment about young people today not understanding family commitment. Cousin Beth spoke loudly about how she had helped her parents refinance their home because that is what loving daughters do. I maintained my composure, sipping sparingly from a glass of white wine and keeping my responses pleasant but brief. The tension in the room was palpable, everyone seemingly waiting for something to happen. That something began when Dad clinked his glass to call for attention. The party guests gathered in the living room, forming a loose circle with Mark and Jessica at the center. I stayed near the edge, instinct warning me to maintain a clear path to the exit. "Thank you all for coming to celebrate our wonderful son," Dad began, raising his champagne flute. "Mark has always been the kind of son who makes parents proud. Responsible, hardworking, and most importantly, loyal to family." The emphasis on the word loyal was not subtle. Several guests glanced in my direction. "As many of you know, we have had some financial challenges recently," he continued. "But today I am happy to announce that those worries are behind us thanks to family pulling together." My pulse quickened. I knew what was coming but felt powerless to stop it. Specifically, I want to thank Cassandra for her generous contribution to the family's well-being. Dad turned to face me directly, raising his glass higher. "Her decision to share the equity in her condo will not only secure our retirement, but also help give Mark and Jessica the wedding they deserve." The room erupted in applause. Relatives beamed at me with newfound approval. Mark looked surprised but pleased. Only Jessica appeared uncomfortable, her eyes darting between me and my father. "I think there has been a misunderstanding," I said, my voice somehow steady despite the adrenaline flooding my system. "I have not agreed to any such arrangement." The applause died awkwardly. Dad's smile froze in place. "Cassandra," he said with forced joviality, "this is not the time for jokes." "It is not a joke. I never agreed to share equity in my home. I have been quite clear about that in our previous conversations." Mom stepped forward, her face flushed. "Cassandra, let us discuss this privately." "There is nothing to discuss. I will not be using my condo as collateral for your loans. That decision is final." Dad's face darkened dangerously. "Step into the kitchen. Now." The command transported me back to childhood reprimands, and I almost complied automatically. But I was no longer a child. "Number. If you want to discuss this, we can do so another time. This is Mark's birthday celebration." "You selfish, ungrateful brat," Mom hissed, abandoning all pretense of civility. "After everything we have done for you." The room fell silent, every eye fixed on our family drama unfolding like a car crash in slow motion. "I am not ungrateful," I replied, struggling to keep my voice level, "but my home is not yours to claim." Dad grabbed my arm fingers, digging painfully into my flesh. "Kitchen, now." He practically dragged me through the dining room into the kitchen, Mom following close behind. The party guests' murmurs faded as the door swung shut behind us. "How dare you humiliate us like that?" Dad growled, releasing my arm with a shove that sent me stumbling against the counter. "We already told everyone. The papers are ready to sign." "That was premature on your part," I said, rubbing my arm where his fingers had left red marks. "I have been consistent in my refusal." Mom's face contorted with rage I had never seen before. "You ungrateful little witch. Everything you have is because of us. Everything." "No," I countered. "What I have is despite you, not because of you. I worked for my success while you were busy celebrating Mark's every achievement and ignoring mine." "There you go again with the jealousy," Dad sneered. "Always competing with your brother." "This is not about Mark. This is about you treating my property as your personal piggy bank." Mom grabbed a champagne bottle from the counter, her knuckles white around its neck. "You will sign those papers. You will help this family. Or I swear to God you will regret it." "Are you threatening me? Over a condo I purchased with my own money?" "It is not just a condo," Dad shouted. "It is your obligation, your duty." "I have no obligation to bankrupt myself for your poor financial decisions." What happened next occurred so quickly, I had no time to react. Mom swung the champagne bottle in a vicious arc. Pain exploded across my temple as glass connected with flesh. Warm liquid cascaded down my face, a mixture of expensive champagne and my own blood. I staggered backward, vision blurring. Dad stood frozen, seemingly shocked by Mom's action. Mom herself stared at the broken bottle in her hand as if unsure how it got there. The kitchen door burst open. Mark and several relatives crowded the doorway, expressions horrified. "What the hell is happening?" Mark demanded. Blood dripped onto my blue dress, staining the fabric a dark purple. The room tilted alarmingly. "She attacked me," Mom said, dropping the bottle. "Cassandra went crazy when we asked about the condo." The blatant lie snapped me back to focus. "That is not true. She hit me with the bottle." "Why would Mom hit you?" Mark asked, but his eyes tracked the blood trail from my head to the broken bottle on the floor. Doubt crossed his features. "Because I would not give them my condo," I said, pressing a kitchen towel to my bleeding head. "They planned to announce it without my agreement." "You are ruining everything," Mom cried. "My son's birthday, our financial security, this family." I looked at my brother, silently pleading for support for recognition of the truth. For one moment, I thought I saw understanding in his eyes. Then he said, "Why do you always have to make everything about you, Cassandra? Could you not just help them out this once, instead of causing a scene at my party?" The betrayal was complete. Even with blood streaming down my face, I was still the villain in their story. "I need to go to the hospital," I said, moving toward the door. No one offered to drive me or even help me to my car. As I passed Mark, he whispered, "You could have just signed the papers." I walked through the silent party, past stunned relatives and friends' blood soaking the towel I held against my head. No one tried to stop me. No one offered assistance. They watched in silence as I left, their loyalty to my parents and brother apparently outweighing basic human compassion. In my car, hands shaking so badly I could barely insert the key, I realized a fundamental truth: this was not a family. This was a transactional relationship that had become dangerous when I refused to comply with their demands. Blood dripped onto my steering wheel as I drove myself to the emergency room, my vision blurring with tears and pain. Something had broken tonight that could never be repaired. And strangely, beneath the physical pain and emotional trauma, I felt the first hint of liberation. The emergency room doctor seemed skeptical of my explanation that I had fallen against a champagne bottle until a nurse noticed the finger-shaped bruises forming on my arm. She quietly asked if I felt safe going home and if I wanted to file a report. 6 stitches closed the gash on my temple. The concussion diagnosis explained the nausea and dizziness I had been fighting since leaving the party. The doctor prescribed pain medication and rest, advising someone should stay with me for the next 24 hours. I had no one to call. Friends from work were acquaintances at best, and I had allowed family obligations to consume any time I might have used building deeper relationships. Sitting in the hospital cubicle holding discharge papers with no emergency contact listed, I felt profoundly alone. "I can call someone for you," the nurse offered gently. "There is no one," I admitted, "but I will be fine." Her concerned expression followed me as I walked slowly to the hospital parking lot, my head throbbing with each step. At my condo, I double-locked the door and wedged a chair under the handle before collapsing into bed fully dressed. My phone had 37 missed calls and 62 text messages, none of which I could face reading. Morning brought pain and clarity in equal measure. The messages ranged from concerned to threatening. "Mom, how could you embarrass us like that? Call immediately." "Dad, you are making a big mistake. We can still fix this if you come to your senses." "Mark, way to ruin my birthday. Mom is devastated. Fix this." "Aunt Patricia, your mother explained everything. How could you attack her when she has done so much for you?" The family narrative had solidified overnight. I was the aggressor, the ungrateful daughter who had somehow attacked my mother when confronted about my selfishness. Not one message asked if I was okay or acknowledged the reality of my injury. 3 days later, still nursing my concussion, I drove to the local police station. The officer who took my report listened without judgment as I described the incident. "Do you want to press charges?" he asked when I finished. The question gave me pause. Did I want my mother arrested for assault? Despite everything, the idea made me uncomfortable. "I just want this documented," I said finally, "in case things escalate." "That is wise," he noted, completing the report. "Family situations can be complicated. Having an official record protects you if there are future incidents." Almost immediately after filing the report, the threats intensified. Dad left voicemails warning that I had crossed a line by involving authorities. Extended family members I barely spoke to sent messages expressing their disappointment in my vendetta against my parents. Even childhood friends reached out to suggest I was overreacting to a family disagreement. Mark's betrayal cut deepest. My brother, who had seen my bloodied face, texted Mom and Dad might lose everything because of your police report. I hope you are happy now. Not one person asked for my version of events. The family had chosen their truth, and it did not include my bloody dress or the stitches in my temple. A week after the party, I found myself sitting across from a therapist recommended by the hospital's social worker, Dr. Wilson listened attentively as I recounted not just the birthday party incident, but the patterns of favoritism and emotional manipulation throughout my childhood. What you are describing sounds like a lifetime of conditional love, she observed. Your value to your family appears tied to what you can provide for them, particularly in comparison to your brother. I always thought it was normal, I admitted, that all families operated on a system of obligations and debts. Healthy families support each other without keeping score, she said. The expectation that you would sacrifice your financial security to solve problems you did not create is not reasonable or loving. Those sessions became a lifeline as I navigated the isolation of family estrangement. Dr. Wilson helped me recognize patterns of emotional abuse I had normalized and provided tools for setting boundaries without guilt. During this period of reflection and healing, a strange coincidence occurred. Sorting through old documents for my insurance claim, I found papers from my grandparents' estate. My father's parents had passed away within months of each other 5 years earlier, leaving their house to my father. Something about the documents caught my attention. The dates seemed inconsistent with my memories. My grandparents had always said they wanted the house to benefit both their grandchildren equally, but these papers indicated the property had been left solely to my father. Curious, I contacted the law firm listed on the estate documents. After verifying my identity as a family member, they confirmed my suspicions. The original will had indeed designated the house to be sold upon my grandparents' death, with proceeds split between my father and his children. However, a codicil filed just weeks before my grandmother's death changed the terms, leaving everything to my father alone. The timing struck me as suspicious. My grandmother had been in hospice care during that period, heavily medicated and often confused. The signature on the codicil looked shaky compared to her normal handwriting. Further research revealed another startling fact. The house my parents currently lived in was not actually in their names. It remained in my grandparents' names, with no record of property transfer after their death. The will had never been properly probated. Armed with this information, I consulted an estate attorney, bringing copies of all documents I had found. Based on what you have shown me, there are several irregularities in how this estate was handled, the attorney confirmed after reviewing the paperwork. If the will was never probated, and if there are questions about the validity of this codicil, you potentially have standing to challenge the current ownership arrangement as one of the originally named beneficiaries. What does that mean exactly? It means the house your parents are living in may not legally belong to them. If the original will stands, you and your brother would each have claim to 1/4 of its value. The revelation presented a strategic opportunity I had not anticipated. My parents had attempted to take my property through manipulation and violence. Now I discovered they were potentially occupying a house that partially belonged to me by right of inheritance. The irony was not lost on me. All their talk of family obligation, while they had apparently manipulated my grandparents' final wishes and denied me an inheritance that was rightfully mine. I did not make the decision lightly. For days I weighed moral and practical considerations. Was pursuing this claim an act of justified self-protection or vindictive retaliation? Would it bring closure or prolong a toxic dynamic? In the end, Dr. Wilson helped frame the decision in terms of boundaries and consequences. Your parents attempted to take your property, she noted. They resorted to violence when you refused. Now they continue to threaten and malign you. What message does it send if there are no consequences for those actions? The question resonated. All my life I had absorbed their poor treatment without pushback. Perhaps that was why they believed they could demand my condo without resistance. I need to protect myself, I realized aloud, both financially and physically. Yes, she agreed. And sometimes protection requires decisive action. That evening, I called the estate attorney and officially retained her services. The decision brought neither joy nor relief, only grim determination. This was not about revenge. It was about finally standing up for myself in a language my parents would understand. The estate attorney Meredith Blackwell specialized in contested wills and property disputes. Her reputation for thoroughness and strategic thinking made her the ideal advocate for my complicated case. "We need to approach this methodically," she advised during our first official meeting. "First, we will conduct a complete title search and examination of all property records. Then we will file for formal probate of your grandparents' original will, challenging the codicil on grounds of potential undue influence and questionable capacity." The investigation revealed even more concerning details. The notary who had witnessed the codicil was a close friend of my father's with an expired license. Several required legal notifications to beneficiaries, including me, had never been sent. Most damning, the attending hospice nurse had noted in my grandmother's medical records that she was non-responsive and heavily sedated on the date the codicil was supposedly signed. "This is textbook improper influence," Meredith observed as we reviewed the evidence. "Combined with the failure to properly probate the estate, we have solid grounds to petition the court." The formal legal claim was filed 6 weeks after Mark's birthday party. By then, my parents had escalated from threatening messages to actual harassment. Dad had shown up at my workplace, causing a scene in the lobby until security escorted him out. Mom had contacted my clients with vague allegations about my ethical problems. The restraining order became necessary when they began parking outside my condo building at night, watching my comings and goings. The judge granted the temporary restraining order based on the police report of the assault and documentation of ongoing harassment. It prohibited my parents from coming within 500 feet of my home or workplace and banned all contact except through legal representatives. Their reaction was swift and predictable. Dad called from a blocked number, leaving a voicemail that bordered on incoherent rage. "You think a piece of paper will keep us from our rights? You have no idea what you have started. We raised you. We own you." The message violated the restraining order and was added to our growing file of evidence. When they were formally served with the estate challenge documents, the harassment temporarily ceased. I imagined their shock upon realizing I had discovered the truth about my grandparents' will. For once, they were on the defensive. Their attorney, a family friend who had known my father for decades, reached out to Meredith with a settlement offer. They would relinquish all claims to my condo if I dropped the estate challenge. "That is an implicit admission they know their position is weak," Meredith noted. "They never had any legitimate claim to your property to begin with. We should proceed with the case." The court date was set for August, 3 months after the birthday party incident. In preparation, Meredith deposed the hospice nurses, the family attorney who had prepared the original will, and several family friends who had knowledge of my grandparents' wishes. A pattern emerged from these testimonies. My grandparents had been explicit about wanting to provide for both their grandchildren. They had expressed concern that my father might not distribute assets fairly if left to his discretion. The original will reflected these concerns with its specific provisions for me and Mark. My parents' defense strategy centered on attacking my character and motivations. Their legal filings described me as vindictive, mentally unstable, and driven by jealousy of her brother. They claimed the estate challenge was retaliation for reasonable parental guidance they had offered regarding my finances. The court was unimpressed by these emotional appeals. The probate judge focused instead on the procedural failures and concerning circumstances surrounding the codicil. "The evidence suggests significant irregularities in how this estate was handled," he noted during preliminary hearings. "The failure to properly probate the will, questionable circumstances surrounding the codicil's execution, and lack of required notifications to beneficiaries all present serious concerns." As the case proceeded, my parents' financial situation deteriorated further. Dad's business officially closed, and credit card companies began collection actions. The stress visibly aged them. Mom's social media posts became increasingly bitter, filled with vague references to ungrateful children and family betrayal. Mark remained firmly in their camp, occasionally serving as their messenger when they wanted to pressure me without violating the restraining order. "They are going to lose the house because of you," he texted. "Dad is having health problems from the stress. Is this really worth destroying the family over?" I did not respond. The family had been broken long before I took legal action, fractured by years of favoritism, manipulation, and conditional love that finally culminated in violence. The court ruled in my favor on primarily technical grounds. Regardless of the intent behind the codicil, the failure to properly probate the estate and transfer title means the property legally remains part of the estate of the deceased, the judge wrote in his decision. The original will, which has now been properly submitted for probate, clearly designates the property to be sold with proceeds divided among the beneficiaries. Practically, this meant I now owned a 25% interest in my parents' house, with Mark owning another 25% and my father 50%. The court ordered the property sold within 6 months with proceeds distributed according to these percentages. My parents' attorney immediately filed for reconsideration, which was denied. They had 30 days to appeal or comply with the order to sell. 3 weeks after the ruling, I received a call from my father's new attorney, a more pragmatic professional than their previous counsel. My clients would like to discuss a private arrangement, he began. They wish to keep the house if possible. What are they proposing? I asked conference, calling Meredith into the conversation. They would take out a new mortgage to buy out your interest. They are prepared to offer $75,000 for your share. The amount was significantly less than market value for a quarter interest in the property. More importantly, it came with no acknowledgement of their actions or the harm they had caused. The offer is declined, Meredith responded on my behalf. My client requires full market value for her share and has concerns about entering into financial arrangements with individuals who have demonstrated hostility and violated a restraining order. After consulting with Meredith, I made a counteroffer. I would sell my interest directly to Mark if he wished to help our parents keep the house. This would remove me from any ongoing financial entanglement with my parents while still giving them a potential path to remain in their home. Mark declined, claiming he could not afford it. The truth I suspected was that he did not want to deplete his wedding funds to solve our parents' problems. With no other options, the court appointed a real estate agent to handle the sale of the property. I took no pleasure in seeing the for sale sign appear on the lawn of my childhood home, but I felt a sense of justice being served. Actions had consequences even for parents who believed themselves entitled to take whatever they wanted from their children. The house sold quickly in a seller's market to a young family with 2 small children. At the closing, which my parents did not attend, I received a check for $112,000, representing my quarter share of the sale price, minus fees and expenses. That afternoon, as I deposited the check, my phone rang with Mark's number. They have to be out in 30 days, he said without preamble. They have nowhere to go. Are you happy now? This was never about happiness, Mark. It was about consequences. They are our parents, he insisted. Whatever they did not deserve this. They assaulted me when I would not give them my home. What did I deserve? He had no answer for that. After a moment of silence, he said, They want to meet with you, to try to work something out. Dad says he can apologize if that is what you need. The conditional nature of the offered apology told me nothing had really changed. They still saw reconciliation as a transaction, with my forgiveness being exchanged for their performance of remorse. The time for working things out was before Mom hit me with a bottle, I said. Before Dad violated the restraining order. Before they tried to take my home and destroy my reputation. There is nothing to discuss now. So that is it. You are just cutting them off completely. They cut me off the moment they decided my property was theirs to take. I am just making it official. The conversation ended with Mark calling me heartless and declaring I was no longer his sister. The words hurt, but less than I expected. Perhaps I had already mourned that relationship during the months of his betrayal. 2 weeks later, my parents moved out of the house and into a small apartment across town. They took with them furniture, appliances, and fixtures that technically belonged to the estate and should have been included in the sale. I chose not to pursue this final violation. Some battles were not worth fighting. The day after they moved, Dad made a final attempt at contact, cornering me in the parking garage of my building in violation of the restraining order. Security camera footage later showed him waiting there for over 3 hours. You think you have won, he said as I tried to walk quickly to my car. But you have lost everything that matters. Family is forever, Cassandra. You will regret this when you have no one. I did not respond, simply entering my car and locking the doors as he continued to shout. Once safely inside my condo, I called the police and my attorney. The violation extended the restraining order for another year, and finally seemed to convince them that further contact would only worsen their legal situation. In the silence that followed, I began the process of rebuilding a life without the toxic family connections that had defined me for so long. The road ahead looked both terrifying and full of possibility. 6 months passed, like turning pages in a new chapter of my life. Winter gave way to spring, then summer, marking half a year since the violent confrontation at Mark's birthday party. The physical wound had healed to a faint silver line near my temple, barely visible unless I pulled my hair back. The emotional wounds took longer but were healing in their own way. My condo became a true sanctuary. I redecorated, replacing the neutral tones I had chosen to please potential future buyers with colors that brought me joy. The living room walls now glowed a warm terracotta. The kitchen featured hand-painted Mediterranean tiles I installed myself over a long weekend. Each change represented a small act of reclaiming my space as truly mine. The most significant change came in my relationships. With guidance from Dr. Wilson, I made conscious efforts to build connections based on mutual respect rather than obligation. I joined a book club, started taking weekend photography workshops, and volunteered at an animal shelter. Slowly, genuine friendships formed. Rebecca from the book club became a regular dinner companion, her insightful literary analysis matching her compassion when I gradually shared pieces of my family story. Michael from the photography group taught me to see beauty in unexpected places, and never once questioned why I declined invitations to certain family-centered events. Anita, who ran the animal shelter, demonstrated a matter-of-fact kindness that helped heal my shattered trust. These connections lacked the intensity of family ties, but offered something more valuable: acceptance without conditions. No one kept score of favors or demanded sacrifices as proof of loyalty. We simply enjoyed each other's company and supported one another when needed. Professionally, I channeled my experiences into helping others. The inheritance money allowed me to create a small scholarship fund for first-generation college students without family financial support. Twice yearly, the fund provided grants to young people determined to build independent lives despite challenging family backgrounds. Working with these students reminded me that family trauma was not unique to my experience. Many others navigated similar waters, seeking shores of safety and self-determination. Their resilience inspired my own. 3 months after the house sale, I received an unexpected email from my mother's sister, Aunt Jennifer. We had never been close, as she lived across the country and visited rarely. Her message surprised me. I heard about what happened from Mom's perspective first, but some things did not add up. When I saw the restraining order documentation through a friend who works at the courthouse, I realized there was more to the story. If you are willing, I would like to hear your side. Our subsequent phone conversation revealed that Aunt Jennifer had experienced similar controlling behavior from my grandparents and understood the generational patterns at work. Your mother and I were raised to believe family meant total sacrifice of individual needs, she explained. I broke away early, which is why I have always been the black sheep. You are stronger than I was to stand your ground. That conversation opened a small window to my past without pulling me back into toxic dynamics. Jennifer shared family stories I had never heard, helping me understand the forces that shaped my parents without excusing their behavior. We maintained cautious contact, exchanging occasional emails and holiday cards. In September, I received word through this new family grapevine that my parents had adjusted to apartment living but continued to struggle financially. Dad had found part-time work at a hardware store, a significant step down from owning his construction business. Mom apparently complained constantly about their reduced circumstances and blamed me openly for their problems. The news brought neither satisfaction nor guilt. Their situation was the natural consequence of their choices, not my responsibility. I wished them no further hardship, but felt no obligation to rescue them from difficulties they had created. More surprising was an unexpected text from Mark in late October. Jessica and I are postponing the wedding. Things are complicated with Mom and Dad. I still think you went too far, but I understand better now why you had to protect yourself. The message stopped short of an apology, but represented the first acknowledgement from any family member that my actions had been defensive rather than malicious. I replied simply, "Thank you for that. I wish you and Jessica well." Whether this small crack in the family narrative would widen into genuine understanding remained to be seen. I left the door slightly ajar without expectations, focusing instead on the life I was creating for myself. That life continued to flourish in unexpected ways. My real estate business expanded as I developed a specialty in helping first-time homebuyers navigate the complex market. I found deep satisfaction in guiding others to the security and pride I had fought so hard to protect for myself. A year after the confrontation, I sat on my balcony watching sunset paint the harbor in shades of gold and pink. My condo had increased in value, but its worth to me went beyond market assessments. These walls had witnessed my transformation from a daughter desperate for approval to a woman standing firmly in her own power. The journey had been painful beyond words. I carried scars both visible and hidden. Yet I found myself experiencing moments of genuine peace, something that had eluded me throughout years of trying to earn my family's unconditional love. Dr. Wilson had helped me understand that protecting yourself is not selfish, setting boundaries is not cruel. Refusing to be exploited is not ungrateful. These realizations freed me from the guilt that had been my constant companion since childhood. Perhaps the most important lesson was recognizing that family is not merely a biological designation, but a relationship that must be earned through respect, support, and love. My parents had claimed ownership of me based on DNA and years of basic provision, but they had never truly seen me as a separate person with my own legitimate needs and rights. Financial independence had given me the practical ability to escape the cycle of manipulation. Without my condo as leverage, I might have remained trapped in patterns of compliance and resentment. This understanding strengthened my commitment to helping others achieve similar security. The future remained uncertain in many ways. Would Mark eventually reach out in genuine reconciliation? Would my parents ever recognize the harm they had caused? Would I someday create my own family based on healthier principles? These questions had no immediate answers. What I knew with certainty was that I had survived the worst consequence my parents could inflict: complete rejection from the family system. Having faced that fear and found strength on the other side, I was free to build connections based on mutual respect rather than obligation and control. As darkness settled over the harbor and lights twinkled on boats and distant buildings, I felt gratitude for the painful journey that had led to this moment of peace. The path forward would not always be easy, but it was undeniably mine to choose. If you have ever had to make the difficult choice between self-preservation and family expectations, know that you are not alone. Have you ever had to set boundaries with loved ones who could not respect your independence? Share your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with others who might be struggling with similar challenges. Remember that creating a life of authenticity sometimes requires difficult choices, but the freedom on the other side is worth the journey. Thank you for listening to my story.